when we're talking about veterans, you have a huge amount of veterans who come through Texas, be they stationed at Fort Hood, be they down in San Antonio. Those are our two biggest bases, or out in El Paso. So three biggest bases. And they see Texas and they go, hey, I like it here. This is a good state to raise a family. This is a good state to start a business. This is a good state that's not going to bury you in taxes and in regulations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special edition podcast on empowering veteran entrepreneurs in Texas. I'm your host, Yarina Hotlip, and today I have an honor to speaking with the Chuck Wright, who was assigned this March by Governor Greg Abbott as one of the Texas Veteran Commissioners. He was serving at the Marine, and he had this passion of helping veterans. So he served for 8 years with the TVC Fund for Veteran Assistance Program, where he was the vice chair. And now he's serving veterans at the Texas Veterans Commission. And I do understand that Texas is the home for more than 1.5 million veterans, which making it one of the largest veteran hubs and population in the country. The largest.
The largest. Everything bigger in Texas.
There you go. That's absolutely true. So can you please provide a little bit overview of the Texas Veteran Commission and its mission?
Absolutely. And thanks for that introduction. So the Texas Veterans Commission, if I could sum it up into one word, is advocacy. We are Texas's advocates for our veterans, pretty much regardless of what the issue is. And if it is an issue we don't directly cover, we can get that veteran to the agencies and the organizations that will support that particular cause. We have 9 different pillars of support: claims, benefits, education. As we just got through talking about off air, our Vetrepreneur tribe, we have an entrepreneur arm for veterans. I think it sounds better if we call that the Vetrepreneur tribe, and I am trying to change that in the lexicon. We were the first state in the nation. Every state has a veteran agency. We were the first state to have a women's initiative. We have a mental health initiative. And then the one we were talking about last, which is the committee that I served on before being appointed as a commissioner, I spent 8 years on our Fund for Veteran Assistance. And that's important today because if you are a Texas veteran service organization, or if you are an organization, so Save the Brave was one. They weren't based in Texas, but they had a lot of operations in Texas, and they were eligible to apply because they could use the grant for their veterans that they were supporting in the state of Texas. And that grant window is open until November 12th. If you will go to the TVC website, and it's tvc.texas.gov. It's real easy to find. Under grants, there are several webinars that will walk someone through. And you don't necessarily have to have a grant writer. If you do, probably a little better. But you can walk through and answer the questions in each block completely. We do it all online, and then you can submit it. It takes about an hour and a half. You'll need to upload financials and things of that nature. But last year, and I love telling this story, so I'm gonna sidetrack just slightly. I wrapped up at the end of 2023. I did my 8 years on the Fund for Veteran Assistance Committee, so I effectively termed out. I was called in February and then notified officially in March, and was then sworn in May as one of the Texas Veterans Commissioners. So it was funny, when I walked into the offices to get sworn in, I saw a friend of mine who is now the number 3 man at TVC, retired Colonel Charlie Cato. And I said, you just can't get rid of me, man. I ain't ever going away. So he just laughed. He thought that was funny. And he'd been, when I first got on FEA, he was my first executive director, and he's now moved up and is number 3. In fact, seems like everybody that I was involved with has all gotten promotions. And my friend who was doing communications when I first came on, Elaine Zavala, is now the executive director of the FBA. So it's really pretty neat. We're funded by the Texas Lottery. So for all you Texans, make sure, and I make this suggestion, and if you're going to send a card to somebody, you're going to send Christmas cards, for all of your veterans, buy a veteran lottery scratch-off card, because that's how we're funded. So I'm out here promoting gambling in the state of Texas. But that is what, and I like to finish with FVA, and that's what we're doing. And then the one thing I say, I talked about advocacy. If you're a veteran, or you know a veteran who needs any kind of help, and I'm not talking about, although certainly if you got a veteran contemplating suicide, dial 211. And in the state of Texas, 211 will get them directly to help. But if you got a veteran who is looking at employment, who is looking at education, who wants to file a disability claim, and I mentioned claims and benefits, they are 2 separate animals. Info at tvc.texas.gov, that same website address, let us know. Let us know how we can help. Give us a narrative. We will have somebody in touch with you, and we will route you to the right place. And it is not unusual for a veteran to call in, and we have new software coming that's going to help us break down how many actual veterans we serve and how many different ways we serve them. And I think the record right now is 6 different services to 1 veteran, but we're going to check and we're going to find out. But we can do a lot of things for veterans, and it's really easy to contact us. I think I told you this story before. I liken it to groundhogs or prairie dogs. Should use prairie dogs because I just got back from West Texas. So when you leave the military, maybe 6 months, might be 6 weeks, might be 6 months, might be 6 years. Started out wrong. But after a while, you pop your head up out of the ground like a prairie dog and you start looking around and, hey, this is supposed to be a great state for veterans. And I think I have benefits, but I don't know if I have benefits. I'm not sure where to turn. Start with us. Info at tvc.texas.gov, and we will start the advocacy process. Now, I will also say every county above a certain size, so most of them with any real population, will all have county veteran service officers. And we train them. We provide them with some support, but they are county institutions, so we only go so far with what we do with them, but they can also get you on the path. And it is amazing how many times people like that will reach out and go, okay, we need help with this case. Not a problem. We want to make it look seamless. We're not worried about who gets credit, but we're going to get them uploaded. And most importantly, one of the biggest issues is claims. We partner nationally with a nonprofit that is all attorneys, that all practice before. So most people don't know, if you have a claim that is either rejected or is not what you think you should get, you can file an appeal. That appeal goes to an actual court. So we have attorneys that are well practiced in front of these courts that will come in and argue your claim for you. And what is amazing about them is the Texas Veterans Legal, it's a P word and then service. I don't know what it is. I don't have all the new anagrams memorized. I am sorry, but it's not important. We will automatically refer your case over to them and start that appeal process. And as I'm talking about all of this, what we're trying to do, and here's the important part. Anybody who's dealt with a VA, Anybody who has dealt with government bureaucracy knows, and it's not done intentionally. These are good people trying to do good things. But by golly, at the end of the day, it is in fact a bureaucracy, and they are incredibly inefficient. And that leads to a lot of frustration. And I'm actually going to go over to one of our major cities next week, and we're talking about the fact that they give veterans the direct line to the VA. I'm like, why in the world would you do that? You're asking for somebody just to be totally frustrated trying to work through this Byzantine morass of bureaucracy when they can send us an email and we'll cut through a ton of it. We'll make sure your claim doesn't go to a claims officer in DC or wherever they're sitting until it's ready to be reviewed. And we'll cut out a huge amount of that back and forth. Our goal in a lot of cases is just to reduce the frustration factor. Now, it's not our only goal. Different departments have different things. As you and I have been talking about the Vetrepreneur Tribe, we want to help. Well, we still want to, there's paperwork, but Texas makes it very friendly for veterans to do business in the state. We want to help. We want to help grow your business. With our women's initiative, all kinds of programs that get the women veterans engaged. And it's shocking to me how many women don't realize the benefits that we have. So I've kind of rattled on a little bit. We have a very broad and very deep selection of services, and we just want to encourage our veterans to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Just to tackle and double down a little bit on the grant you mentioned, that there is
Yes.
a little bit more than a month. So the business should be or heavily operating in Texas or be officially registered in Texas. But should this business be officially certified as a veteran-owned business, or that's not necessarily, I still can apply. If I'm a veteran, I own a business, but I do not have passed any typical certification, am I eligible?
Okay, so you are conflating two different programs. So with the Vetrepreneur Tribe, with our entrepreneur program, yes, we will help get you designated as a veteran business. We will help you file with the Secretary of State, happens to be Jane Nelson, who used to be my state senator. And we will get you plugged into that office. And once we do, if you are an LLC, an S Corp,
C
anything
Corp
but
or
a sole
whatever.
proprietor, you will have franchise taxes waived for 5 years. So we will help on that side. The grants I'm talking about are not grants for businesses.
Oh, that's only nonprofits, right?
This is only for our nonprofits,
Got it.
our state, county, and city municipal entities can all apply for those to support our veterans. And that's what it is. But I use the example of Save the Brave. They were not domiciled in Texas, but they were able to apply for a grant to work with the Texas, uniquely with the Texas veterans. So kind of two different programs, providing some great benefits, but we will make sure if you are a veteran, your business is listed as a veteran business.
Absolutely. Got it. Thank you so much for
programs.
that. For that clarification. Maybe because I'm operating with the, in the space of the funding for the businesses, I tend to hear everything being connected solely.
I get you.
Absolutely. Okay. And you mentioned that there are a lot of opportunities for the Texas businesses to start up business or to, scale it up. And there is that understanding, quite correct, that there is a huge exodus from the typical fancy hubs, especially when we're talking about tech-related companies, from the California, New York, starting from the Tesla, Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, etc., you name it. All the giants are starting to move to the Texas, but what's not necessarily being correct, I'd say, communicated is the fact that a lot of folks are assuming that the main reason was COVID. While the major amount of the huge companies started their movement somewhere around 2015, way before COVID hit us all.
Oh, yeah.
And COVID, it seems to me, just had speeded up all these processes. So, in your opinion, what was the major reason behind of that, and how did everything this exodus reflected on the veterans community?
So we're going to go slightly political because your question carries a deeper I'm trying to think of the word. It's deeper than just veterans. And that really started, you're going to point to a date. It started in 2008 and a lot, but it really comes down to get away from the political and to get into the real economic data.
Right.
Texas has been, in 2008 was the last big recession. And people were looking around and they were looking at things like affordability. They were looking at things like a low tax base and a strong business base where there were a lot of opportunities. Now, keep in mind, when we're talking about veterans, you have a huge amount of veterans who come through Texas, be they stationed at Fort Hood, be they down in San Antonio. Those are our two biggest bases, or out in El Paso, so three biggest bases. And they see Texas and they go, hey, I like it here. This is a good state to raise a family. This is a good state to start a business. This is a good state that's not going to bury you in taxes and in regulations. I don't mind regulations when they're serving a purpose. I do mind regulations that are designed just to be onerous. There are so many filing fees and things like that. It can be a little bit ridiculous. And our veterans looked at it, and, and let's be honest, how many of these veterans changed their state of record to either Florida or Texas, because we're no income tax states. So you see a climate that is geared to helping the populace grow. Now, the governor, and this is the last couple of governors, going back to even farther than W, and really starting with W, really started to promote Texas to veterans. And we started to see the relative to California, which was the other big populous state, you see the veteran population here can steadily grow. And veterans tend to not necessarily make a fortune. We understand that. That's just the nature of the beast. So any taxes at all become a much bigger issue than some tech executive who's making $500,000 a year and flying first class.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a different animal for them. But you have highly supportive organizations here. Now, say something else. The other thing that they found is when they were in transition, they were calling organizations like the Texas Veterans Commission. They were calling the Texas Veterans Workforce, which is run by my Marine friend. The commissioner is Joe Esparza, and we have a working relationship with him. We have an MOU. And so we have partnerships. So I was talking before about finding services for veterans. We have partnerships. Not only do we do our own employment work, and it's a major part of what we do, helping veterans get connected to jobs, we also work with the Texas Veterans Network. We do work with the Texas Veterans Network. We work with the Texas Workforce Commission. The Texas Veterans Network is not as geared on the employment side, much more geared to the, I want to say soft side, but that might not be the exact description. And that is run by Marine Mia Garcia in Houston. She's based out of Houston. And by the way, Joe Esparza is another Marine. So you will start to see a pattern here. We've got, you want something done, put a Marine in charge. Although the Texas Veterans Commission's executive director is in fact an Army colonel, retired, who is also a former instructor at the Army ROTC chapter at the University of Texas. So he's kind of Austin centric.
Oh, I'm absolutely here with you. My advisor and business partner, he's also Marine. So I'm here with you. If you wanted to make the
You want
job
something
done,
done? Call a Marine.
exactly. And he's also Chuck, by the way. So for me,
There we
it's
go.
like, yeah. So I'm like
No wonder we
surrounded.
have such an immediate and strong relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. There you go. So, okay, getting back to the original question, and I'm like, I'm not trying to be political here. I tend to believe that there is more economical situation
Yes.
connected.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
and there was no
These people are
way.
they're voting with their pocketbook. And that's
Exactly.
really the answer, the short answer that you were looking for. They're voting with their pocketbook. There's a reason you look at the states that are growing, you look at the states that are shrinking, and it's not hard to figure it out.
Absolutely. But what I want to also to talk about, if I may, um, with my previous guest, that was Dr. John Sebasta. He is a PhD from the University of Denver. And they were doing the research connected to the systematic problems of getting access to the funds for minority-owned businesses, including also veterans businesses. And what they
Yeah.
discovered is that
Veterans are considered a minority owned business.
exactly. I mean, sidetrack and side problem, in my opinion, is the fact that military spouses aren't still assuming as the minority
Yeah.
owned or the at least economical disadvantaged group of
Right.
entrepreneurs. And that's a big problem because if you have veteran, you also will have military spouses, and most probably military spouse will have a lot of problems with the getting job because of all the movements, right, and building career, typical career. Therefore, they're going to be basically forced
Right.
to start their own business. But the systematic problem or issue, which was discovered by Dr. John Sebasta and his group of researchers, with the fact that, like, among others, that it feels like the government, and I'm talking about like on the federal level, currently is putting a little bit wrong incentive uh, by making sure that folks will be able to start business, no matter when, if we're talking about minorities or like just regular folks, doesn't really matter. It's all about helping you to start business. But there is so-called valley of death from the year 2 to the year 5. When you're trying to survive, you are not eligible to most of the loans and you have no idea how to fund your business. And in 2019, let me double check my numbers. Yep, SBA, that was the latest report I could find available out there, reported that 59% of all the veterans will tend to use only family money or their own savings to survive.
Yep.
So it feels like we have to tackle that problem, talk about it, and think about like how we can deal with this valley of death. And it seems to me that the Texas Veteran Commission is the perfect place, especially taking into account that you do have the whole pillar focused on basically tackling that problem.
Well, I'm not sure how much work we're doing with that. That is a change that has to be made. Certainly, we have organizations, I think I've connected you with a couple of them, that are working with the military spouses. Part of the problem is education. It's one of the reasons I'm on your podcast, is hopefully more and more people will see this. And my number one ask, and I'll repeat this at the end, is if you're on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, like or follow us on all of those, just so we can start getting more and more information out and share it with people. It's one of the things that I'll be doing because we're doing such a broad extent of work. Now, having said that, let's come back to your question. While we're not we're looking at this as an internal policy. There are certainly people working at the federal level to get military spouses assigned to that underutilized, I think is the word the feds use, group, which includes veterans, but military spouses. Absolutely, I support that 100%. And it's trying to do more and more of that. Now, I will say this for the military spouses who may be listening, or to the veterans who, their spouse is thinking about starting a business, there are, and I want to see a better network built, which is again part of you and I's relationship, where people have access to that veteran information. And with that said, there are I know two campuses for sure. I'd like to grow it. One of my goals as a commissioner my two biggest goals are, number one, to increase the awareness, especially in North Texas where I am, of who the TVC is and what we do and how we can help. But number two has always been to grow and make more robust our Veteranpreneur tribe. And having said that, I'm going to give a shout out to Patrick Alcorn, who is a West Point grad, who is at the University of Texas at Arlington. And they have in their boots to boardroom, or battlefield to boardroom seminar workshop is coming up in October. And that's at the University of Texas at Arlington, which, by the way, according to Military Times, I believe it's 3 years in a row, was rated the best school in America for veterans. They do a great job for our veterans. And then also down at Texas A&M, and I'm going to get with these people. I haven't yet. I've only been on the job 6 months, so I haven't been able to do everything I've wanted to do yet, but it's coming. The people at Texas A&M have a veteran-based school program that is doing great work as well. And I know that my friend up here, John Albers, who runs Albers Aviation, is involved in that. And we're trying to find more and more opportunities to get veterans into starting business, but also on the employment side, you were talking about companies like Oracle, et cetera. On the employment side, we're trying to get veterans employed. And that is one of our 9 pillars is veteran employment. We go about that several different ways. We're actually supporting or sponsoring several job fairs around the state, and that's an ongoing process. So one of the reasons to follow TVC is we make at least a post a day on our website because it is such a large state. It's hard for people that are not in Texas to understand, but DFW, where I am, the DFW area, home of they beat another bad team last night, Dallas Cowboys, but by golly, they won. DFW area is the size of Rhode Island, Delaware, and Connecticut combined. If we were a state unto ourselves, we would be 18th in GDP. That's how large we are. Let me give you another. I love this particular stat. People talk about the world becoming overcrowded. Well, the cities are becoming overcrowded, but if you take the whole world and everybody in it, they would all fit in the state of Texas, and they would all have their own unique 2,000 square feet. So you think about the size of a small house. Everybody would have the size of their small house, everybody on the planet. And I didn't believe it till I did the math, and it wasn't hard to do, and I just did the division on a calculator, and I went, son of a gun, that's true. So, big state. The bottom line is a very big state, second in size only to Alaska, with California once again coming in third. Sorry, I had to do that.
Oh, that's all right. I'm here with you. Okay, so getting back to the question, you've covered up greatly, at least in my opinion, the topics connected to the starting business and employment. Do you have currently any programs who are helping already existing businesses to survive? I mean, can they come to you? I assume that yes, right? They still can come to the.
So we have in the past done our own Business 101 programs in the form of webinars. We are not currently doing that right now, but what we are doing is, if you were to email us and say, hey, I've been in business for a year and a half, I'm not sure what's going on, we can refer you to our partners who can help. But that is probably going to be when I talk about making our Veteranpreneur tribe arm more robust. that is probably going to be one of those that we create. And the problem is I have all these great ideas, but we only have so much staff. Um, I will be real candid. We are the most efficient state agency going. Good news is we're very efficient and the governor likes that. The bad news is we don't really have a lot of room to grow. The demand for our services is growing. We are hoping that we are going to get a little bit more funding in the go back into session. So it will be approved this year, and then we'll have the funding for 2026. So we're kind of a year out from having the money to do anything, which is why we are relying so heavily. And we will be we talked about battlefields to boardrooms. We will be out there. We will be out there helping and supporting. And if you're a business in anywhere near North Texas and you want to attend, check out the UTA business site. Again, it's on LinkedIn, it's on Facebook. They've got their own website. This would be a great way to attend if you have those kind of questions, and a great way to network. I cannot believe the power of networking, even if it's just, hey, I met this guy or this girl who's running this business. And I'm going to pick on one of my favorite Navy people is Tiffany Jones. And she's very tall. She's like 6 feet tall. And I hate the fact that she's taller than me, but just the way it rolls. She started a business, a fashion design business for women, basically 5'10" and over. And it has been very, very successful. I met her through another program for entrepreneurs. That was a nationwide program. And by the way, according to Penn Federal Credit Union, and it's PEN, it's from the Pentagon, they do a survey every year, and Texas is always in the top 5 for veteran business.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I believe that I know that designer you were just talking
Tiffany Jones?
Yeah, I believe that I do know her from one of the other conferences, and she might become my next guest. I really, really hope so.
There we go.
She's absolutely amazing.
We stay in touch on LinkedIn.
All right. Yeah, we'll do that. So, yes, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of veteran businesses. So, except of the Tiffany, can you share a bit more of the use cases? Because I believe that if the business is growing, and that's inevitably, that means that more and more and more jobs will be created, which means that most probably more veterans will find those jobs.
You just stole my thunder right there. we like veteran businesses because they tend to hire veterans.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah. There is, I can't remember the gentleman's name, and I need to reach back out to him. I need to find him. But one of the things that's happening right now is that in Texas, we don't have the exact numbers. We're trying to figure out who the veterans are and what the demographic is. But generally speaking, the VA always alludes to the fact that there is a significant number of them that are 60 and older. So obviously, as the business owners, how much longer do they plan to work? And a lot of them would like to cash out and leave. And we'd love to see programs that get set up. And I think that's what this gentleman is trying to do, where a veteran takes on in a mentor-mentee style relationship another veteran to eventually run the business and to take it over. But, and this goes back to what you do, at some point, somebody's going to have to write somebody a check for that. And how do we fund that?
Exactly.
And that gets into things that I do professionally. Full disclaimer, I am not in a paid position. This is a volunteer position. And I would be very uncomfortable. Our staff generally, right now, we're 15 to 20% underpaid compared to the rest of the state agencies. And the problem with that is that means the other state agencies can poach our people and offer them nice pay raises. So one of the things coming down the pike is we're just trying to level that all out. So we lose people that way. This goes back to the point about efficiency. We don't take as much money. And if you were to look at our budget, keep in mind more than half of it is FVA money, Fund for Veteran Assistance money, which provide grants for veteran service organizations that provide direct services. We can't touch that money. We don't even take a portion of that money for administrative services. Now, if the Fund for Veteran Assistance does, they get to take their portion out of the grant money, the lottery winnings, or I guess it would be lottery losings. Hate to point that out.
Oh, well, that's
Because face it, it's only the losers that we're getting the money from. The winners get paid.
The winners get money from you, but yeah.
So there we go. They're taking all those winners are taking our money. Anyway, I've always said if I ever win the lottery, 10% of it's immediately going to TVC.
10% of everything.
That's the kind of guy I am. And I got a couple of presidential libraries that I want to fund, and I got all kinds of other stuff that I want to do after I've paid off every one of my debts and bought the wife a brand new car and paid off the house, and I can basically get off the grid when I install my solar system and my generator.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great idea.
I'm never getting off the grid. It's not happening.
None of us will do. Come on. None of us will do assume.
I don't want to check out. I am living my own personal dream. And this is a position that I'm in that I've coveted for a long time. I joke about the salary, but it's okay.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions, and I really, really like to ask it all of my guests. I'm a big believer in I really like that the speech of JFK when he was talking about ask not what country can do for you. And so that would be my question for you. I'm not asking what TVC can do for me or Chuck Wright can do for me, what I can do. And that would be my ask to everybody. Think about how you can support and how you should support to make sure that afterwards TVC will be able to provide that support to those who need it the most. So what we can do, except of finding
this
all...
is going to sound a little bit odd, but the number one thing I'm asking people to do is to like and follow us on social media. And then number two, when those articles pop up on your feed that strike your interest, share them and share the info at tvc.texas.gov email when people need help. I had this happen this weekend. I was talking to one of the one of the Fort Worth City Council people who I think is a Marine, but I'm not sure. But he posted something online and I was kind of offended. I was like, dude, why didn't you reach out to me? But we did reach out and we did, I call it rallying the troops. And we rallied the troops for a veteran who was struggling with suicide. And that's just one of the ways. And again, they wound up calling 211 and they wound up getting him some help, and I hope he's okay. I haven't gotten an update since about 8 o'clock this morning, so we think he's okay and doing well. But it's that is our biggest ask, is to expand our reach so more people know what we do. Because I'm making about a half a dozen a week Zoom calls, and we're kind of doing a podcast here. But things like this where I'm going one-on-one and I'm trying to get organizations to go, you know what, just fire out an email to all your folks and say, hey, if you're not following our friends at TVC, if you don't know what they're doing, follow them and start to learn what they're doing and realize this is Texas's advocacy agency. That was the word I was looking for our veterans. It's one word. It's advocacy. We're your advocates. We'll help cut the red tape. We'll help find you the help that you need. And our people, and I got to say this, I got to throw this in there. I am so impressed as I've gone out and I've started to meet. So we have 420 employees right now. Actually, we have about 380, but we have slots for 420. We have 380 employees right now. We just had a rash of other state agencies coming through and hiring away a bunch of our people. So we're trying to refill those spots. But when I go out and meet with that 300 and I talk to them in the field, or we're at, like recently was at a claims conference, and I just made it a point to walk around and introduce myself to people. And everybody's kind of showing their colors, or they're wearing a name badge, and a lot of them already knew who I was. And I was a little surprised at that. But it was great to meet them, and they are motivated. They are doing what I'm doing, which is serving this shared purpose. And our motto is serving those who served. So,
Right.
the ask, real simple. First, follow us. And second, when you read stuff from us that you like or is interesting, you think your veteran friends will like, share it. And third, if you're really up for it, email 40 or 50 of your friends and say, hey, or put it on your site and say, hey, you got to follow these guys. We got to grow this, because this is all about helping our community.
Right, absolutely. And if I want to act as a volunteer or to help you anyhow, basically by hands, especially taking into account that you've just mentioned that you have this shortage in staff, how can I do that? Is there any possibility?
And I'll be honest with you, I don't know that question, and I'm going to ask that question this morning, because I have one of the veterans that we served who was he was actually in Rockwall County, which is just to the east of DFW, although now it's considered part of DFW as we continue to grow and expand. The lady that I was dealing with was the wife of a Marine Sergeant Major. There's that Marine thing again. And she's asked the same question, and I have an email queued up. It's one of my notes, one of the things I had to do today, as I want to find out what we have. One of our problems is when you have volunteers, you have to give them things to do. And I think one of the things we're trying to do, and hopefully we'll have it next year, is to figure out how to do that, but who runs it, how we feed people to them, what that process is. So
Right.
since I'll say this, since I was on the TVC committee, so now 8.5 years ago, but since I was first appointed, I have watched Tom Palladino as executive director continue to expand the services that we offer and continue to do more and more and more. We're not perfect. Nobody ever is, and we're never going to be satisfied that what we've done is enough, but we're going to continue to try to grow it.
Oh, yeah. I have no doubts about that. Now, just to touch a little bit, your yet another huge experience. You've, at least according to the LinkedIn, you have 38 years experience as the investment advisor.
Yes. I run a small retirement income planning practice. And I've kind of, like everybody in my field, I've always done investments, but there have been a bunch of other things that were part of it. But as we got to, what was it? So I've been married 22 years, so probably 23 to 25 years ago, I got very, very focused on retirement income planning. And that is different from anybody and their brother can tell you to buy stocks and grow money, or buy the S&P 500 index. It's actually a great way for the average investor who doesn't know, doesn't care, doesn't want to deal with the headaches of the market, say, hey, I'm just going to buy the whole index and boom, go from there. We try to keep it very simple. We do a couple of things. We add a piece to that is actual guaranteed retirement income money. That also comes with dividends from effectively a blue chip stock company, although it's not a stock company, it's a mutual company. But it serves a purpose of building a base. And what our vision is, we want to create a base, have a little pyramid. I got to tell the story because it's always funny. My golfer guys always do this. So the bottom line of the pyramid is food and housing and transportation and all the basics. I always talk about having those basics covered. And then the second tier is all the fun stuff, golf and travel and all of those things that you do that make retirement. And when you envision retirement, fishing, and I said traveling, it's amazing how many times I'm talking to a golfer and he moves the golf down to the bottom line priorities. And I always laugh at that. I always think it's funny. But again, this is, I mean, and I do this, and everybody gets to do their own plan, but it's absolutely right. So basically, what I want is I want that base covered, guaranteed. Don't have to worry about that. The bills are paid every month, no matter what happens. That second tier, I want to have money in the market. And here's the logic to it. Let's say you love to travel. The market has, and let's say you've got I'll put $1 million over there. And so generally you can pull 3 to 5% of that off every year and you're going to be okay. More than that, you get into the danger zone. But let's say, for example, the market crashes. We go back to 2008 that I'd mentioned before.
Right. And there is still such possibility. There is no guarantee.
Now we're not flying first class to go see the Normandy beach. Now perhaps we're driving up to Colorado to see the Rocky Mountains. So you adjust your spending in a category that you can do that, and thus you're not taking money out while the market is down. And the idea is that over time, you've got the flexibility to grow that up. So anyway, you asked me what I did, and that's what I do. And I love working with individuals and small businesses, which goes back to my Vetrepreneur tribe. Many of my small business owners are veterans, or they are patriots that support veterans, and they are very supportive of what I'm doing.
Absolutely. I can absolutely understand that. I'm one of those, folks who are supporting veterans. So, yeah. So just to touch a little bit the question regarding retirement plan, because I'm 36 now, and I'm keep thinking whether it is too late to start think about that or it is okay-ish. What's going to be the best time, to think about that?
So they say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago.
That's true.
The next best time, you know where I'm going. The next best time is today.
Yeah.
So, but to your point, have you missed opportunity? Probably. But honestly, if I go back to generally 18 is when most people start working. So if I go back those 18 years, you probably haven't had a lot of income. So, and I'm generalizing because I know a little bit about your past. So have you really missed a lot of opportunity? No. But this is a perfect time. And you talked about having a son, and I'm not licensed in California, so I can't make you a client yet. But I will say this: start a 529 for him, so you can send him to school. And that 529, they've got them in every state. That 529 will cover whether he wants to go to a university, whether he wants to go to a trade school, or you know what? If he decides to go in the military, because he's a fine candidate for the Marine Corps. Or he does something else, he gets scholarships, whatever else, you can always convert that to money that you could use for education and pull the money out tax-free. So I will tell you that, $50 a month, if you can afford that, boom. And if you can afford $50 a month into a Roth IRA, I 100% recommend that. And I also recommend, however much you're putting over there, you take that much money and you're putting it and moving it over to the savings account in your checking account. Because I tell my clients, I want to grow that up till you've got 6 months worth of expenses. So if we hit COVID again, boom, you got the money to pull out. And you've got the money to survive for 6 months with no income.
Yeah, but there is this I'm not sure what's going to be the size of the general national debt. It's closer to 17 billion now, or trillion, sorry. And it's growing every day. So it feels like at some moment of a time, the nation in overall has lost a little bit their track and turned from saving to absolute spending. So
now you're talking about the government, and you and I agree about that. Most people agree about that debt is way too high. And part of the problem with that is COVID. Part of it was a couple of really bad bills that were passed into law that absolutely increased spending. And not to go too political, but we have one candidate that is running to grow business, and we have another candidate who's growing literally on a platform. Her latest commercial is all tax and spend. Not that I'm telling people how to vote, but if you're worried at all about that, tax and spend, I have to let. I studied economics at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I don't consider myself an expert, but I certainly consider myself knowledgeable. And the one thing I can say is there has never been a time in our history when tax and spend got us out of a problem. And some people argue, well, FDR and the Great Depression. No. Actually, if you go in and really dig into the economic numbers, we were coming out of the Great Depression. He just made it worse with his tax policies, and he kept pushing it back down. So, and it wasn't World War II. We were already on the way. Now, World War II helped. Don't get me wrong there. But you look at what happened right after World War II. We backslid. And you look at what happened with Guns and Butter, LBJ's plan in the mid-'60s in the Vietnam War. And that led us to, and Jimmy Carter gets blamed for stagflation, but that got set up by a Democrat and two Republicans that led up to him. So I don't blame Jimmy entirely. Good man. Happy birthday. He's 100 now, he is the oldest former president, which I think is kind of cool. I voted for him, believe it or not, in 1976. So you can figure out how old I am from there.
I'm going to leave the mass aside. That doesn't really matter.
But it does matter to your point. So we were in an era of stagflation. What we need to do is we need to grow the country, but I 100% agree. We need to curb some of this spending. And one of the things, it's one of the reasons Elon Musk is part of the Trump team. Sorry, I'm going off on a political thing, but I'm going to finish this thought. One of the things he wants to do is something that Reagan did, which was put together a panel of experts to talk about how we could make the budget better. People will say Reagan increased spending. This is absolutely true. Reagan also dramatically increased tax revenue. Dramatically did that by increasing real median income. But I want to point something out. When he left office, our debt to GDP, and I'll relate this to you personally. You are a person, you make $100,000 a year. And you have to service out of that $100,000 $40,000 between mortgages and cars and all that stuff. So your debt to service ratio or debt to income ratio is 40%.
Yep.
Reagan had us at a very healthy 36 when he left. It was up from where Carter left it, but I'm like, and if the country is drowning, what good is having debt to GDP low? Today, we sit at 121% as of this morning. That's out of control. If we could get it down to even 80%, it really wouldn't be all that hard. If we can look at some of the spending, and that's the commission is supposed to be able to do that, we're going to make a significant difference in the health of the country. And long term, that's going to pay huge dividends for us.
Oh, yeah, I'm here with you. Absolutely. I tend to believe that we have no other choice.
Yeah.
Rather than figure out how we can become more effective, more efficient in everything what we are doing,
yep.
And start to build up once again, because we had that before, that understanding that we have to have liquidity, that we have to save money. Yep. In order to be able to spend, to have that flexibility you've talked about earlier, right? That you have to have that base 100% cover and then flexibility on top of that. But
so if I can throw in one last thought, you talked about you being 36 and you think it's too late, and I kind of laugh. If anybody here is a 60-year-old listening to me, how do you get there? Well, one thing, you may have wanted to retire at 66. You may have to go to 70. I'm sorry, I'm the guy who's going to tell you that. But what else are you going to do? I watched my father-in-law, and he retired, and he sat around and did nothing. Now, he has health issues. I'm not sure they're entirely related to him sitting around, but sitting around didn't help him at all.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is continue to save, and you start. And you know what? If you're 60 and you're not saving anything, I want you to start with 5%. I swear you will not miss 5%. And you start saving 5% and you add every year 2% to it. Because remember, when we go from 2024 to the end of 2025, you're going to get used to the 5%. So the 2% change is just that, a 2% change. And you keep doing that until you're 70. And now you're putting away 15% of your income. So you've added a pretty good chunk to it. Now you're also able to maximize what you can take out of Social Security. And this is the other thing that's hilarious. And I find this all the time. You might be frustrated with your job, that you retire and you realize you want to do something. Now, maybe it's you come and you're like me and you volunteer to help. And that's plenty. That's plenty good. But even if you're 60 years old, you can make it. Sorry, a little bit of commercial for my planning practice, but I think it is information the public needs.
It is important. I tend to believe that, I tend to agree with you that, I mean, being 36, it's a little bit way too late. And just to give the context, right, I was starting to plan my retirement, I believe when I was 28, when
Okay.
I just got when I just delivered my baby to this world, I was like, okay, that's the time.
It's amazing how having a child will make you so much more responsible.
I mean, I've just I believe that wasn't the moment. I'm going to lie if I would say that was the perfect moment of the time. I believe when my son was a year old, I started to realize that now I'm adult, truly adult.
Yep.
Now I'm turning into the human being who knows what responsibility means. And what was even more important to understand, that I'm okay with making bad choices. That's experience. I'm going to pay my debts no matter what. I'm grown up. I'm adult. I can make it happen. And yeah, that was very, very interesting to find yourself at that position. So I tend to believe that it is very important for any human being to feel at least once that you are truly adult.
Sure.
That now you know how to handle that.
Yep.
But I mean, it is very important to think about your retirement. It is very important to think about how you will handle with everything, with the transition, getting back to the veteran affair and everything connected to it. Almost every guest I already talked to at my podcast, or I'm planning to talk, will in any way but touch the ground about the complexity of transition, health, mental health issues, and complexity of starting business and surviving in that world. And it is not easier for veterans. It is much, much harder, even though 82% of all the veteran-owned businesses seeing themselves as the successful. And banks and financial institutions seeing veteran-owned businesses as responsible business owners.
Absolutely.
So that's why you can get the loan, you can get that help. You just have to ask. You just have to go to all the basically organizations available out there, starting from the TVC. And if these folks will not be able to help you, they know exactly where you can come with your problem. And this is even more important. You're not necessarily have all the knowledge in the world, but if you know where to find that information.
Absolutely.
That's what's important.
That's absolute power. And that's how we advocate for our veterans as we get back on topic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights, experience, and being super candid. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave all the links you mentioned below in the description of the video. And I would encourage everybody, please go share, spread the word around. This is very important. And this is the least we can do to support all the amazing job that TVC is doing. Please do that. I'm going to do that for sure, and much more than that. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, my friend. Look forward to talking soon.